Welcome back, fellow Walking Dead fans. It's your brother Lal Winstrom coming to you, still with these post Season 7 premiere feelings of grief, loss, and anger, and deep sadness at the departure, the untimely departure of our dear brothers Abraham Ford and Glenn Rhee. In this second half of my discussion with you, I wanted to share some thoughts and feelings about where we are and where we're going. And in particular, I wanted to talk to you about the response of Maggie and Rick to this tragedy. Let's begin by telling some truths about where we stand in terms of the situation right now, starting with what Maggie said in this scene.
I need to get you to the hilltop. I need to go get ready. For what? To fight them.
Now, I wanted to say that I believe that just about all of us can agree with Maggie's broken heart at this point. And when I say agree, I am talking about in terms of what she just said to Rick. That he needs to go get ready. He needs to prepare Alexandria to stand up to the saviors, to oppose them, and to defeat them. She is correct in this, and we all know that she is correct in this. But I think what Rick said next to her is also very important. That they have an army. They're well organized. And that they would all die if they tried to oppose Negan at this time. Now, Maggie's heart is broken at the death of Glenn and what she saw happening around her, because she, in fact, believes that much of this is her fault. But though her heart is broken, and though she may be scattered, her feelings may be scattered, her resolve is unwavering. You need to prepare to fight them, she tells Rick, and she is correct. However, Rick is also correct in that they are not prepared to confront the power and the strength and the organization of Negan and the Saviors. And here is where we must, again, as I mentioned to you in our last video on this, here is where we must restrain our righteous indignation for justice until we are in a better position of power and strength ourselves to confront those things that are unrighteous and unjust in this world. And here we see that the family is now faced with a similar situation where they must put their desire for revenge on hold, where they must put their desire for justice, the more important factor, on hold. And they must lick their wounds, heal from their fractured psyches and souls, bond more tightly to one another, and thereafter seek out people, seek out allies who may in fact help them to redeem that which they have lost, to overtake and recover all, as one might say. And we see here that Maggie's spirit, like Abraham in this instance, while it, as I said, may be crushed, it is not defeated. And so I wanted to mention this to you because I believe it is important that the spirit that Maggie has in this scene is a spirit that should galvanize and animate all of the rest of the family and us as viewers as we go forward with this turning point in the Walking Dead's life and in the life of our family, as we see them going through this trial, this travail, something that they have never experienced before. It reminds me actually of what Deanna said to Michonne in one of last season's episodes. In time, this pain will be useful to you. And I said this in a recent video, or another video, but I still believe that it is something that was foreshadowing what was to come. This event, this sequence of events, not just these two deaths, but what will happen after that in the subjugation of Alexandria to Negan and the Saviors. This is a pain that in time will be useful to all of the family, but in particular and especially to Rick as a leader, to the leader that we know Maggie will become at Hilltop, to Michonne, and many others of our family as they go forward. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Now let's get on with, let's talk about Rick as well, because I want to discuss him in our analysis, and I want to point out some things about Negan and Rick's interaction in this episode that I believe are vital to our understanding of what is to come. Now, in this sequence, what I want to focus on is the fact that we see Rick being broken down and made to submit by Negan. What we're seeing here is a psychological test of Rick at one level. There is another level, and I'll discuss that shortly. But what we're seeing is the breaking of Rick. Negan, as you can probably tell, is very good at reading people. Like many people who are generally psychopathic or sociopathic, he has something of an instinctual ability to read people and to read how they are malleable, how they are weak, what areas they are weak in, and how he can manipulate them. And there are many examples in history of such personalities, from Adolf Hitler to Joseph Stalin to Idi Amin, and on we could go. But like all tyrants, in the case of those three that I mentioned, those three famous real personalities that I mentioned, Negan has the ability to read people's emotions, to read their states of mind, from their body language to how they look at you, to how they look at him in this case, and more. And he sees that Rick is still in a defiant mode, that he is not yet ready to bow down and to bend the knee, as it were. So he still must break Rick down. And as Rick goes to retrieve this axe, which is a symbolic action in itself, Rick begins to, in these flashback sequences that we see, he begins to realize everything that he has to lose, not just in terms of his personal life with Michonne and his son and little Judith, who is still out there in Alexandria, but all these other people who he has come to know and care about and love as a family, and whom he now has put at great risk. He must deal with this fact as a leader, and he must recognize that it is not just himself alone who stands to lose, should he continue to defy Negan. All of these other people will suffer, and they will suffer greatly. This is part of the tremendous pain that you see in Rick's heart, while you see him doubling over, as we can tell right here, not just with some physical exhaustion, but with the pain and anguish of total defeat. Now, that is one level. To watch Rick understand that if he resists Negan, not only will these people suffer greatly in their subjugation, but that he will be forced to watch them die, while indeed not only he watches, but others watch, powerless to intervene, powerless to stop it. Again, as I say, that's one level of this. Will Rick sacrifice more of his people on the altar of impotent and fruitless and useless revenge? Or will he swallow his pride and bow down to Negan? What did Negan say to him? Think about what has happened. Think about what can happen. Not just to himself, that is to Rick, but to all of those people he loves. Again, think about what can still happen. Okay, so what else? That's one level. But what do we see happening here in this scene? I believe what you also see happening in this scene by Negan shoving Rick out the door in a fog filled with walkers to find this axe is not just an act of subjugation to go get the axe. In other words, do what I say unconditionally. But it is also putting Rick's will to survive to the test. In this instance, that means putting his resolve as a leader to the test. Will Rick finally bow down and do what Negan demands of him in order not just to survive himself, but for his people to survive? But at the same time, will he also bow down to the architecture, to the new order that Negan has laid out? You see, like any would-be ruler, would-be tyrant, would-be emperor, if you will, Negan needs people willing to do what he says. He needs people willing to lead, but who are willing to lead in his name, under his rule, under his authority. Even the most ruthless and tyrannical and psychopathic tyrant cannot rule by himself. He requires others to do his bidding and to make the other minions fall in line. In this sense, Negan is testing Rick's resolve to survive in this new world order. Does he have what it takes to be one of his imperial legates? For those of you who understand that term, that is an old Roman term used during the days of the Roman Empire for a military governor / overseer of the Roman provinces in the imperial structure of the empire. Okay, does Rick have what it takes to be one of Negan's imperial legates in this new Neganite empire that Negan is building? That's what that fog walker stuff was about, all right? So, go get my axe is not just him trying to break Rick down in terms of him understanding that Rick is still defying him. It is also a way of making sure that Rick has the ability to rule over his people, his own people in Alexandria, but to do so in Negan's name. And if he does not, then it's time to replace Rick with someone else who can and who does and who will. That's the new Neganite system. That's the new world order that Negan is referring to in this as I like to call it, Neganite empire that he is building. But there's more. We still have to make sure that Rick is broken sufficiently in order to be part of this new Neganite empire. And that is where the next and greatest and last test comes.